The wind howled like a wounded beast across the high plains, slashing through the mesquite and cottonwood groves that dotted the edges of the Callahan homestead. A sheet of cold rain lashed the windows of the main house, and distant thunder rolled over the bone-dry land, cracked now into mud by the sudden violence of the storm. Nora Callahan pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders and squinted into the storm. Something was wrong with the horses. They'd been restless all evening, snorting, stomping, and now, over the roar of wind and rain, she could hear them whinnying in sharp, panicked bursts. The barn. Something was at the barn. She grabbed her lantern and rifle, the familiar weight comforting in her small, calloused hands. She wasn't a woman of fear. Not anymore. Not since her husband died during a cattle drive. Not since the border. Gangs started sweeping closer to the ranch lands, and certainly not since she'd learned that survival often came down to who stepped forward first, not who was strongest. Boots squelching in mud, she made her way to the barn. The heavy door creaked open against the wind, and she stepped inside, raising her lantern high. That's when she saw him. A massive figure slumped beside the center post, blood soaking his chest and dripping from a gash above his brow. He leaned heavily on a horse so dark and lean it might have been carved from onyx. The animal stood still, its sides heaving, rain steaming off its coat. The man straightened slowly, towering over her, nearly brushing the rafters even as he swayed. His face was fierce, bronze skin streaked with blood and rain, eyes sharp despite the haze of pain. His long black hair was soaked and tangled with leaves. "You're not what I expected," he said, voice low and guttural, thick with weariness. "And something else disappointment. Your brother said—" A sturdy woman. Nora didn't move, didn't lower the rifle. "My brother said what?" He blinked, confusion flickering behind dark eyes. "He promised me a woman, one with strength, with land. Said his sister could help me start over." Nora's heart slammed in her chest, part rage, part dread. Her brother. Always scheming, always gambling with other people's lives. He'd ridden off months ago toward the southern range, looking to settle debts or make new ones. She hadn't heard from him since. "And he sent you here?" she asked. "Wounded, during a storm, chasing a promise?" The man nodded slowly. "I am Kohana. I fought with him, your brother. He said he owed me, blood for blood." Nora exhaled, lowering the rifle an inch. She studied him, his labored breathing, the sluggish bleeding from his shoulder, the way his legs trembled under his weight. "You're bleeding out," she said. "I've bled worse. That horse looks about ready to drop dead. She's strong." "Well," Nora muttered, stepping forward and grabbing the reins, "then maybe we've got something in common after all." Despite every warning bell in her head, she helped him down. He collapsed with a grunt, but didn't cry. Out. Nora could tell he was fighting to stay upright, to keep some shred of dignity, even now. That counted for something. "You got a weapon on you?" she asked, still wary. He opened his coat weakly, showing her a knife and a bone-handled Colt. "Not for you." "Good to know," she said. "Now get inside before you drown standing up." She helped him stumble across the muddy yard, her shoulder barely reaching his ribs, the giant man leaning on her like a collapsing tree. Inside. The warmth of the fire stung the chill from their skin. She dragged a blanket from the rocker, pushed aside a chair, and motioned for him to sit. "Let's get one thing straight, Apache," she said, voice low but not cruel. "I'm nobody's prize. I'm not sturdy in the way you wanted. And whatever my brother promised you, it wasn't his to give." He met her eyes, and for the first time, she saw something shift in him. Not anger. Not pride. Understanding. "I see that now," he murmured. "But someone was." Nora paused. The storm howled outside, but inside the cabin, a different kind of storm had just begun. By the time first light cracked across the distant mesas, The storm had rolled on, leaving behind a battered sky and pools of rainwater that shimmered like silver coins in the dry dirt. The wind had calmed, but the quiet was unnerving, the kind that usually came before the trouble showed its face. Inside the cabin, Nora Callahan leaned over the stove, grinding beans with a cast-iron mill. The smell of wood smoke and strong coffee filled the room, blending with the coppery tang of blood still lingering in the air. She glanced toward the cot beside the hearth. Kohana hadn't moved all night. The blanket barely covered his broad chest, and his dark hair spilled across the pillow like spilled ink. She'd cleaned the wound in his shoulder with boiled water and whiskey, her last bottle, and stitched it shut with shaking hands and the same needle she used on saddle straps. He'd winced, but hadn't cried out once. Now he stirred. His eyes opened slowly, lids heavy, but alert. "You didn't kill me," he said hoarsely. "Didn't see the point," Nora replied without looking. "You'd already bled enough on my floor. Figured I'd at least get a story before I buried you." She poured a tin mug full of black coffee and carried it over. He sat up slowly, accepting it with his good hand. "Careful," she said. "It bites." He drank anyway and winced at the bitter burn. Better than dying in the rain. Nora sat across from him, her chair creaking under her slight weight. She folded her arms. "Tell me about this promise." "About my brother." Kohana's jaw tensed. He stared into the coffee, eyes flickering like coals. 3 months ago, he began, we crossed paths south of El Paso. Your brother had gotten into trouble with some cattle thieves. Claimed he was just passing through, but they had him cornered, blamed him for stealing their horses. "Sounds like him," Nora muttered. "I helped him escape," Kohana said. "We rode together for 5 days. He was full of stories. Promised everything. Gold, land, and then he said he'd repay me. Said his sister lived alone on a good patch of land, knew how to work a ranch. Said you were tough, sturdy." He looked at her now, eyes calm. "He said you needed someone like me." Nora's face darkened, lips tightening into a thin line. "So he sold me off like part of the damn property." "No," Kohana said. "He spoke of you like you were the last good thing he had." That silenced her, just for a breath. "He's dead, isn't he?" she asked. Kohana nodded. "The day after we parted. Shot down near Las Cruces. Some say over cards. Others say the bounty hunters caught up to him." Nora stared into the fire. Her brother had always been a storm-loud, fast, destructive. But underneath the foolishness, there was something loyal, maybe even kind. She'd never know now. "I didn't ask for a man," she said quietly. "I asked for peace. And I didn't come looking to take," Kohana said, "only to heal." They sat in silence a moment, the crackle of fire and the distant drip of rain from the eaves the only sound. "You'll stay until you can." "Ride," Nora said at last. "No longer," he nodded, agreed. "But if you lift a finger toward me or anything on this land, you'll shoot me," he said. "I believe you." A smile tugged at the corner of her lips, the first, in what felt like months. "Good," she said, standing. "Now drink up, Apache. You've got about 6 hours before the chores start. And if you think I'm sturdy now, wait till you see how I swing a shovel." Kohana laughed softly, the sound foreign and rough in his throat. Outside, the land steamed under the newborn sun. But in the quiet little cabin at the edge of nowhere, something unexpected had begun to take root trust. Not deep, not yet, but just enough to make room for the next storm and the one after that. Asked ChatGPT. The sun climbed slowly over the plains, burning away the morning chill. By mid-morning, the land had returned to its usual state, dusty, hard, and humming with heat. Nora Callahan stood outside the chicken coop, apron dusted with feathers and flour, hands on her hips as she surveyed the damage left by the storm. The fence was leaning. 2 water troughs had tipped, and the tool shed door hung from one hinge. Sighed and turned toward the barn, where Kohana sat on an upturned crate, sharpening her broken axe. His wounded shoulder was wrapped tight beneath a clean bandage her work. The pain had drained much of the fire from his eyes, but not the awareness. He tracked every sound, every movement, like a man who'd spent too much of his life sleeping with one eye open. "You don't have to work," she called out. "Not with that shoulder." "I don't sit idle while someone else hauls buckets and berries." "Fence posts," he replied. Nora raised an eyebrow. "You'll tear your stitches, then stitch me again." She shook her head, not hiding the smirk. "Suit yourself." They worked side by side through the morning, neither saying much. Kohana moved slower than her, but he was deliberate, careful. He didn't waste motion or energy. When she drove nails, he steadied the wood. When she fed the stock, he cleared the water lines. It was like working with a shadow solid, quiet, present. It wasn't until Nora tried to move a fallen beam near the corral that things turned. She grunted as she strained against the weight, legs braced, arms trembling. The beam refused to budge. Without a word, Kohana stepped in, grabbed the edge, and lifted slowly, steadily until the beam tipped clear. He dropped it to the side with a grunt and looked down at her, brow raised. "You'll throw your back out," he said. "And you'll bust open your shoulder," she snapped, brushing dirt from her hands. He shrugged. "Some things are worth the pain." "Like impressing the little woman?" he chuckled. "Like getting the job done before nightfall." Nora narrowed her eyes, but something in his tone, light, teasing, not mocking, cut through her annoyance. "You really expected someone twice my size, didn't you?" she asked. "Yes," Kohana admitted. "I imagined a large woman, broad, loud, maybe with a deep laugh and arms like tree trunks." "Well," she muttered, sorry to disappoint. He looked at her then, not just glanced, but really looked. At the way her hands were worn but steady, how she squared her narrow shoulders even when she was tired, how she walked with purpose, not pride. There was something in his eyes, soft, unreadable. "You didn't disappoint," he said. "I was wrong to judge by size." She didn't answer, only turned and walked back to the barn, cheeks warm. Inside, she checked the grain bins while he leaned against a post. "You don't talk much about your past," she said casually. "Not much worth telling." "I doubt that," she replied. "A man doesn't learn to move like you by staying put. And your scars don't come from harvesting wheat." Kohana smiled without humor. "I was a scout, for both sides. Apaches, Mexicans, Texans. War made good use of men like me." "You switch sides often?" "I didn't fight for flags. I fought to stay alive." Nora nodded slowly. "And now?" "Now I'm just tired of bleeding for people who forget my name the moment they ride off." A silence settled between them again. Not awkward, just heavy. Honest. She handed him a cup of cool well water and sat nearby on a bale of hay. "You might not believe it," she said, "but I was once scared of chickens. Couldn't even gather an egg without running." He blinked. "What changed?" "My husband died. Then my brother left. I had to feed myself." Kohana nodded once, like that was all the explanation he needed. "You were right earlier," Nora added. "I'm not the kind of sturdy you expected." "No," he agreed. "But maybe you're the kind that lasts." The words hung there unexpected. Weighty, honest. Nora didn't reply. Outside, the wind picked up again, brushing over the prairie grass in gentle waves. The land was quiet for now, but something in the air hinted that peace never lasted long in New Mexico. And both of them, though they wouldn't say it aloud, were starting to understand they'd found something unexpected in each other. Not safety, not yet, but recognition, asterisk, The New Mexico sky burned gold at dusk, and long shadows stretched across the dry earth like ghosts refusing to settle. Nora Callahan stood on the porch of her cabin, peeling an apple with her pocket knife, watching the last light flicker off the distant hills. Somewhere behind her, inside the house, Kahana moved softly, always softly. Like a man who expected to be hunted. It had been 4 days since his arrival, and he hadn't tried to overstay his welcome, not really. He helped fix the fence, hauled water, and patched the broken shed roof. He didn't speak more than necessary, but when he did, it was never careless. Nora had come to respect that. Still, she couldn't bring herself to fully trust him, not yet. Not after the letter had arrived that morning, tucked inside the saddlebag of a traveling peddler who stopped to trade coffee beans and nails. Addressed to Nora in her brother's wild handwriting, the paper was smeared with dust and dried blood. She read it alone in the barn. Nora, if this finds you, I'm likely gone. I made a deal to settle a debt, more a favor than a trade. His name is Kohana. I owed him my life. He's seen too much war. If he reaches you, don't be afraid. You'll see what I mean, Liam. She didn't cry. She'd buried too many tears long before Liam rode south. But her chest felt hollow for hours after. Now, with the sky darkening and a pot of beans simmering over the fire, she turned to find Kohana at the door, freshly shaved, hair tied back, shirt clean and tucked in. You're not planning on dying tonight, are you? She asked, eyeing him. I figure if I'm going to sleep under your roof, I ought to look less like a bandit. She smirked and waved him to the table. He sat stiffly, still favoring his shoulder. You look like you've seen ghosts, he said quietly. I read a letter from my brother today, she replied. He told me about you. Kohana nodded, eyes flickering. Then you know what I am. I know what you were. There's a difference. He looked down at his hands. I've done things, he said slowly, that don't wash off. I've taken lives, burned homes, some out of survival, others. He stopped, jaw tightening. I was good at war, too good. Nora stirred the pot, and now? I want to build something. Anything that doesn't burn when the wind shifts. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The fire cracked in the hearth, and the night pressed gently against the windows. I lost a child once, Nora said finally. Her voice was steady, but quiet. My husband and I, his name was John, we were young, stupid, hopeful. The baby was stillborn. I buried her myself. Under the cottonwood by the stream, Kohana said nothing. His gaze didn't leave hers. After that, John changed, she continued. He drank more, talked less. Died not long after in a cattle accident. She gave a bitter laugh. Maybe he was just trying to join her. I'm sorry, Kohana said, and meant it. I only tell you this because you think you're the only one carrying ghosts. She poured the beans into 2 bowls. You're not. He took the bowl with both hands, nodding his thanks. After a long pause, he asked, Do you ever stop seeing them? No, she said. But you can stop letting them lead you. He smiled faintly. That's harder than it sounds. You didn't strike me as someone who backs away from hard things. Kohana took a slow breath. I had a woman once, Apache, brave, fierce. She followed me into war, then walked away from it when I wouldn't. What happened to her? Gone, he said. The old ways are dying, and she didn't want to watch them rot. They ate. Quietly for a while, the kind of silence that doesn't strain or beg to be filled. Just 2 people eating, breathing, carrying years behind their eyes. Afterward, Nora brought out a deck of cards. You know how to play? Depends, Kohana said. Is this a game or a test? Nora smiled. Maybe both. As the cards fell and the night deepened, the past hung in the corners of the room, watchful but quieter now. and something unspoken passed between them. Not forgiveness, not yet. But the smallest ember of something else, maybe the beginning of understanding. Or maybe just the first night without war dreams. The days passed with an uneasy rhythm: morning chores, quiet meals, occasional conversation. Though the land remained dry and the sky cloudless, Nora could feel a pressure building, the way animals sense a predator before it's seen something. And the air had shifted. The wind carried whispers now, and even the chickens had grown restless. Kohana sensed it too. He had healed enough to move freely, and by the end of the week, he was riding again, slowly, carefully, taking Nora's spare, gelding out past the ridge and back before sundown. He came back each time with the same grim expression. "Someone's watching," he told her one evening as they sat on the porch. "I saw dust on the horizon. Riders." "Could be ranchers heading to Roswell," she replied, though her voice lacked conviction. "Could be," he said, "but it isn't." She didn't ask how he knew. Some men were made for war. Kohana wasn't just one of them. He'd survived it. That kind of man recognized the scent of blood before it was spilled. That night, she checked the locks on the doors twice and slept with the rifle beside her bed. By mid-morning the next day, her fears proved true. Nora was hauling a crate of feed into the barn when she heard hoofbeats, steady, slow, deliberate. She stepped outside, wiping sweat from her brow, and saw them. 4 men on horseback riding up the main road like they owned it. Dust swirled around their boots, and each one carried a rifle or shotgun visibly slung across his chest. Kohana stepped out from behind the corral, wiping his hands on a rag. His eyes narrowed. The lead rider, a tall, pale man with a bowler hat and a scar across his lip, smiled as he tipped his hat toward Nora. "Ma'am," he said, voice slick as oil. "Mighty fine property you've got here." "You're trespassing," she said flatly. "Just passing through," he replied, smiling wider. "Looking for a man. Apache fellow. Real tall, real mean. Heard he was wounded and wandering. Word is someone's hiding him." Nora glanced sideways at Kohana. His face gave nothing away. He was perfectly still. "I don't know anyone like that," she said coolly. "And you'll be off my land before I get my shotgun, or you'll leave carrying the lead from it." The scarred man chuckled. "You're a sharp little lady, aren't you? But I'd be careful. Hiding a wanted man brings trouble, especially when that man has a price on his head." "Bounty hunters," Kohana said darkly. "Right on the nose," the man replied. $500, dead or alive. Personally, I prefer dead, less risk of talking." "Then you'll have to earn it," Kohana said. "Easy, friend. I ain't looking to make a mess." The scarred man pulled a folded paper from his vest wanted poster, dirt-stained and curled at the edges. Kohana's name was printed beneath a sketched face. "Just doing the law's work. That paper isn't worth the ink," Nora said. "Now I suggest you ride back the way you came." The men didn't move. Silence settled like a shroud. Flies buzzed lazily between them. Then Kohana stepped forward. "If you come back here," he said, voice like gravel, "you won't ride away." The bounty hunter gave a mock salute, then turned his horse. "Suit yourself, but I'll be back, with more men. Next time, I won't be polite." The riders wheeled around and galloped off, leaving a cloud of dust behind them. Nora exhaled and turned to Kohana. "You didn't tell me they'd chase you all the way to my doorstep." "I didn't know they would," he said. "But I'm not surprised." She stared at him a long moment, jaw tight. "You need to leave." "No," he said, "not now." "You think I want a gunfight on my land? You think I want to bury more people I didn't ask for?" "I never asked to be protected," he said. "And I never asked for you." He looked away, jaw clenched. Then Nora's voice softened, but only slightly. "But I'm not letting them burn my home." If there's going to be a fight, I'll face it." "No," she interrupted. "We'll face it. Together." Kohana looked at her, really looked, and this time he saw it. The fire behind her eyes, not just stubbornness, but loyalty. Nora Callahan wasn't made of muscle and brute force. She was made of will. And that was a kind of strength even war couldn't break. He nodded once. "Then we prepare." And as they stood beneath the fading light, side by side, the calm before the coming storm settled over the land. But neither of them flinched. The wind had changed again. This time, it wasn't whispering, it was screaming. By nightfall, the sky hung low and heavy with ash-colored clouds, like the land itself was holding its breath. Nora Callahan moved through the cabin like a soldier checking bullets, locking windows, stashing knives in corners only she would think to look. Kohana was outside setting traps and tying off wire along the fence line. He moved with purpose, as if every nail and knot was an oath. He hadn't asked if she wanted him to stay anymore. He knew she did. They were beyond choices now. The fight was coming. Inside, Nora lit one last lamp and glanced around her home. It looked different now. The cozy space she'd kept with care for years had become a battlefield. But she felt no fear, only steel in her bones. Kohana stepped through the door, his shirt damp with sweat, his eyes cold and sharp. "They'll come before dawn," he said. "They'll want to use the dark." She nodded. "Let them try." They ate quietly. She passed him a tin plate of beans and jerky, and he accepted it without a word. When they were done, she poured 2 shots of the last whiskey hidden behind her books. "Just in case we don't wake up," she said. Kohana raised his glass. "To stubborn women and wounded strangers." They clinked. Then they waited. First shot came just after midnight. A bullet shattered the window above the sink. Glass exploded across the floor. Nora dropped low, rifle in hand, eyes scanning the shadows outside. "They're on the hill," Kohana whispered. 4 of them, maybe more. She crawled to the back wall, shoved open the floor hatch that led to the root cellar, and handed Kohana a sack of cartridges. "You said you don't run," she muttered. "I said I don't run alone." He grinned. The next shot came from the left side of the barn. A moment later, the trap he'd set, a tripwire loaded with sharp nails and broken glass, sprung with a sharp snap, followed by a scream. "One down." Kohana muttered. Another rider tried to flank from the east, but his horse stumbled into a spike pit they'd dug earlier that evening. The beast went down with a horrible cry, and the man was flung hard into the dirt. Nora popped up from the window and fired once, clean. He didn't rise again. For 20 minutes, the night erupted in chaos. Shouts, gunfire, the thunder of hooves. But Nora and Kohana moved like a team, fluid and fierce. At one point, Nora shouted across the room, "You still breathing?" "Not." "If they keep aiming that poorly," he called back, reloading. She grinned. "Lucky for us they brought cowards, not killers." But the bounty hunters weren't fools. The scarred man leader of the pack circled around with 2 more riders and approached from the rear, slipping through the dry wash near the stream bed. Kohana caught the movement through a narrow slat in the wall. "They're coming around." "The back." Nora didn't hesitate. She grabbed her shotgun, kicked open the back door, and fired into the night. The blast caught one rider square in the chest. He crumpled with a grunt. Kohana dove out behind her, rolling in the dirt and returning. "Fire." The second man dropped. That left only the leader. He came fast, firing as he rode, snarling like a feral dog. Kohana stood, leveled his pistol, and shot the horse out from under him. The man tumbled forward, landing hard. Before he could rise, Nora stepped up and jammed the barrel of her shotgun into his chest. He looked up at her, panting, bloody teeth. "Baird, you think this ends with me?" he spat. No, she said. It ends with me. She pulled the trigger. Dawn broke over the valley with eerie silence. The barn was riddled with bullet holes. Smoke still curled from the burned wood along the porch. 3 bodies lay in the dirt, and the rest had crawled off into the brush or never made it out at all. Kohana leaned against the corral, shoulder bleeding again. Nora knelt beside him, tying a new strip of linen around the wound. You all right? She asked, her voice hoarse. I've had worse, he said. Then he smiled. But none of them had your aim. She chuckled softly, brushing a stray hair from her face. We're going to have to bury them, she said. Yeah. And patch the barn, rehang the fence, replace the window. He looked at her, eyes warm despite the pain. You still wish I'd never come here? She met his gaze, unwavering. No, she whispered. I just wish my brother could see what kind of man he sent me. They didn't say anything after that. The sun rose higher, and together they stood bloodied. Bruised, unbroken. Not just survivors, defenders of land, of home, and now of each other. The bodies were buried before noon. Nora dug the graves herself, refusing help until the last one was filled. The ground was hard, sun-baked, and stubborn, but not half as stubborn as she was. Kohana watched her from the porch, arm bandaged again, ribs wrapped tight. He didn't argue. He knew what this was ritual, not for the dead. For the living. By mid-afternoon, the dust had settled and the ranch was quiet again. Too quiet. They sat beneath the cottonwood tree by the stream, the very place where Nora had once buried her child. The breeze carried the scent of wild sage, and cicadas buzzed lazily in the grass. The aftermath of violence often came with this. False calm, like the land itself wanted to forget. But Nora didn't forget. She never did. I used to think I was just surviving, she said, staring at the stream. One day at a time. Feed the animals. Fix the fence. Sleep. Start again. But lately, I don't know. Kohana turned to her, silent. She rubbed the back of her neck. Something shifted. Ever since you showed up bleeding in my barn, I've been doing things I didn't know I still had in me. You protected your home. I fought, Kohana. Not. Ran. Not waited for someone to fix it. I stood and faced down men who came to take everything. She looked at him now, really looked, and saw the flicker in his eyes. Respect, yes. But something else. You gave me a reason to fight again, she said. And I don't know whether to thank you or curse you for it. Kohana looked away. Jaw tight. I never meant to bring war to your door. But you did, and I didn't break. He nodded. No, you didn't. There was a long pause between them. Wind rustled the leaves above. I should go, he said at last. Nora blinked. Go where? There's a settlement east of here. A few Apache families live there in peace. I could trade work for a roof. Maybe build something of my own. Finally, she was quiet. That's what you want, he hesitated. I don't know what I want. I think you do, she said softly. But maybe you're afraid to say it. He turned to her again, this time with nothing guarding his eyes. You're not what I expected, Nora Callahan. You've said that before. I didn't understand it then. I do now. He reached out and gently touched her hand. Her fingers didn't flinch. You fight with fire in your belly, he said. You bury your pain and keep walking. You don't speak much of love, but you carry it, always. She swallowed hard. And you think that's enough to build something from? I think it's the only place to start. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable now. It was full, brimming with unspoken truths and hard-won understanding. Still want to leave? She asked. He took a long breath, then shook his head slowly. Only if you tell me to. Nora stood, dusted off her apron, and looked down at him with a half smile. Then help me rehang that window, she said. We've got work to do. And just like that, It was decided not with a kiss, not with a promise, but with something more solid. Intention as they walked back to the cabin, his limp slowing them both. Her steps steady beside him, there was no more pretending. No more waiting for the past to dictate what came next. They were battered, scarred, haunted, but they were not alone anymore. And that, for two people who'd lived long enough in the shadows, felt like more than enough. The first frost arrived. In late October, crisping the mesquite leaves and dusting the earth with silver at dawn. Nora Callahan rose before the sun, same as always. But this morning, the bed was warmer on one side, and the air inside the cabin held a different kind of stillness, settled, not empty. She pulled on her boots and stepped outside, breath fogging in the cold. The ranch was quiet, the animals still dozing in their pens. Off in the distance, Kohana moved along the corral, dragging posts and coiling wire, his wounded shoulder long healed but never forgotten. He worked the land like it was part of him now, like it had called him home. She watched him for a moment, arms crossed, lips pressed into a half smile. 3 months ago, he'd staggered into her barn bleeding, muttering about a sturdy woman her brother promised. Now he was here, still, by choice. When he noticed her watching, he gave a slight nod and motioned her over. She walked to him through the stiff morning grass, coat wrapped tight around her. "Fence is near done," he said. "Another hour, maybe 2. "I remember when you couldn't lift a hammer with that shoulder," she replied. "And I remember when you wouldn't let me use one without a lecture." "You earned the lecture," she said, smirking. They stood there in the cold for a moment, side by side, the kind of silence that felt like an old friend now. "You know," he said after a while, "when I came here, I had this idea in my head." "Oh, I remember," Nora replied dryly. "You said something about a sturdy woman," he chuckled. "I did. Thought I needed someone with thick arms." And a booming laugh. "Someone who could haul wood and cook for 10 men and still scare off a coyote with one look. And instead you got me." He turned to face her fully, expression softened. "I got someone who stitched up a bullet wound without flinching, who stood down bounty hunters with a shotgun and a stare, who runs this ranch like it's stitched into her bones." He stepped a little closer, voice quieter now. "You're smaller than I expected." "But someone was." Nora tilted her head. "Someone was what?" "Sturdy, brave, the kind of strong that lasts through storms. The kind that carries grief and still gets up the next day to feed the chickens." A pause, long enough for the weight of his words to settle between them. She looked down, then back up at him. "You think saying that earns you a place here?" "No," he said. "I think staying earns me that. I think working for it does. I don't want land or shelter, or favors. I want whatever this is." She didn't respond right away. Then she reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper worn soft at the edges. It was the last letter from her brother. She handed it to Kohana. He read it again in silence. He knew the words by heart now. "Don't be afraid. You'll see what I mean." "He was a fool," Nora said softly. "But sometimes even fools see something true." She took the letter back and tucked it away. "I don't need a promise," she continued. "Not of marriage, not of land, not even of love." Kohana blinked, his throat tightening. "What I need," she said, "is for you to keep waking. Up here. Keep working. Keep sitting on that porch with your coffee, telling me when the storm's coming. Keep building something with me, not for me." He nodded slowly. "I can do that. I know." They stood there a moment longer, the early sun catching the frost on the fence, turning it gold. Then she reached out and took his hand. Rough, solid, warm. Together they walked back to the house. Back to the warmth of the hearth, the smell of coffee, the quiet creak of the old wood floor. Not a fairy tale ending. Not a fresh beginning. Something in between. Something real. Not the life Nora expected. Not the woman Kohanna thought he needed. But exactly what they both had fought to find. A different kind of promise. One made in silence and proven in days yet to come. Ask ChatGPT.